Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas believes in honest conversations like the one you're about to see. For thoughtful insights related to healthcare policy, check out our Blue Promise podcast and videos. Learn more at standingwithtexas.com.
Hello, everybody. I'm Evan Smith, the CEO of the Texas Tribune, and I want to welcome you to today's virtual event, a conversation with Joaquin and Julián Castro. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. This event is made possible and free thanks to the support of Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Texas. I also want to thank our media partner, KXAN. These and other generous Texas Tribune sponsors play no role in determining the content, panelists, or line of questioning at our events. We'll be talking today for about 45 minutes, including your pre-submitted questions. I've got a good batch in hand, and I'm looking forward to asking them on your behalf. If you'd like to tweet about our discussion, use the hashtag TTEvents. And if you like what you see, don't forget that the start of the virtual Texas Tribune Festival is only 6 weeks away. Tickets are on sale now. Tomorrow, we'll announce another batch of confirmed big-name speakers, and it's the best batch yet. Yes, I say that about all the batches. Go to texastribune.org/festival to sign up today. Okay, let's get on with our show. Now it's my pleasure to introduce this morning's guests. Joaquin Castro, Democrat of San Antonio, has represented Congressional District 20 in the U.S. House since January of 2013. In the 116th Congress, he sits on the Intelligence Committee and is vice chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Previously, he served 5 terms in the Texas House, representing District 125, during which time he served as vice chairman of the Higher Education Committee and is Democratic floor leader. Julián Castro served as Barack Obama's Secretary of Housing and Urban Development from 2014 to 2017. Before that, he served 2.5 terms as mayor of San Antonio and 4 years on the San Antonio City Council. He spent most of 2019 and 1 day of 2020 on the campaign trail running for president of the United States. In May, he launched a PAC, People First Future, to build, as advertised, a nationwide bench of progressive candidates. Congressman Castro and Secretary Castro are natives of San Antonio and graduates of Stanford University and Harvard Law School. Thank you both for making time to join us today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Good to be with you.
Good to see you. So before we talk about the coronavirus, gentlemen, we had runoffs in Texas last night. I know you were paying careful attention. Let's discuss the results, if you don't mind, beginning with the top of the ticket, the race for U.S. Senate. Congressman, your candidate, Senator Royce West, conceded this morning after losing by about 4 points. Are you prepared to support the winner, MJ Hager? Will you endorse her right here and now?
Well, first of all, I'm very proud of the race that Royce ran. It was a very close race, and I think, as I told MJ before, of course, I'll do everything that I can to help her beat John Cornyn. I think that she's got a great chance. I think Democrats generally have a great chance in November in Texas.
So you're going to endorse her. You are endorsing her right now.
I am endorsing her, yeah.
Okay, great. Secretary Castro, you did not endorse in this race, am I right? You did not choose between the 2 candidates in the runoff?
That's right. I didn't. We made endorsements in other races.
Right.
Some of these races I endorse in, and he endorses in. Sometimes he endorses and I don't, and vice versa.
Well, we always tell people, why do you need both of us, right? I mean, one of us should be.
It's the whole
People
Patty
think we're
Duke
the same
thing.
person anyway.
Yeah, it's right? The Patty Duke play you've been running for about 20 years now, right? Secretary Castro, does MJ Hager also have your endorsement as of this minute?
Oh, of course. I've said, that I'm going to do everything that I can to make sure that we have a new Democratic senator in Texas. Yep. She's going to be a fantastic candidate. Yep. I think right away what you're going to see in her campaign is, that she has great ideas for the future. She's going to be very competitive with John Cornyn. I think that the fundraising is going to go through the roof now that the primary is over and there's a clear runway to November. So I feel good about her campaign and what she can do in November.
So a couple more I want to ask you about. So Secretary Castro, stay with you. You and your brother both supported Candace Valenzuela, one of 2 Democrats in the runoff in Congressional District 24, and she actually won pretty handily. So she is now the Democratic nominee in an open seat in a part of the state that is considered winnable. I mean, it's going to be a tough race, but it could be winnable by the Democrats. That went the way you wanted it to.
Candace Valenzuela is just a fantastic candidate. She has an amazing life story. She knows hardship. She knows what a lot of families are struggling with, of all different backgrounds. She's going to, I think, be very competitive. I believe that she's going to win that race. And in a time where there's a push among so many people here in Texas for an America where everyone can prosper, they want somebody that stands up for a fair shot for everybody and things like good health care and so forth. And, Beth Van Dyne, her opponent, and people know her track record. She's been a far right ideologue. And I think that Candace is going to do very well in November. And she would become the first Afro-Latina elected to Congress.
To Congress, that's right. So a path breaker. Congressman, Ms. Valenzuela was the progressive candidate in that race, as your brother said. Jose Garza was the progressive candidate in the Democratic runoff for Travis County DA. I swear I looked away from the computer for 1 second after 7 o'clock, and by the time I looked back, his opponent, the incumbent Margaret Moore, had conceded. That one went pretty quickly, did it not? And you both endorsed him. He went easily. Again, he won easily. Again, that's a progressive candidate doing well last night.
Yeah, no, that's right. I supported Jose and also Delia Garza that won
county
in
attorney
Travis County as well.
Right.
Yeah. But Jose's race in particular was a big victory. And so, yeah, I think he's going to do wonderful things for the people of Travis County in the coming years. And he'll be a very conscientious DA.
Yeah.
And, so I expect great things for him.
So a couple of progressive candidates you supported did in fact win last night. There was a question heading into the runoff how this would turn out. The state Democratic Party, last question on the runoffs before we do the virus. The state Democratic Party is crowing about the turnout in the runoff cycle, historic turnout, despite no expansion of vote by mail. More than 955,000 Democrats voted in the runoff, which obliterated the previous record. And in fact, it was more than double the runoff for governor in the last cycle, 2018. In the middle of a pandemic, Congressman, what does that tell you about this election cycle, that so many Democrats turned out?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Evan, that was the most Democratic primary turnout we've seen in decades, right? And I think it tells you that there's a lot of energy. There's incredible energy among Texas Democrats, and we've hit the tipping point where Texas could go Democratic. I think we're going to pick up at least 3 or 4 congressional seats. I think we've got a real shot at taking back the state house from Republicans. Remember, my first year when I came in, when I was 28 years old in the state legislature in 2003, was the year that Republicans had taken over the state legislature. I think Democrats will take back the state house. And I think MJ has got a good shot in that Senate race. And Joe Biden has even got a good shot in the presidential race at this point.
So let's come back to the fall elections at the end. And I want to talk about the presidential race in particular a bit more, but let us stay with the pandemic, which I referred to. And I want to begin on a personal note. Congressman, last week, you tweeted that your stepmother, Alice Guzman, had died after contracting the coronavirus. Condolences for that. She and your father were married 31 years. Is that right?
Yeah, they got married actually July 1989. And Alice, for many years, was a cafeteria worker in the Edgewood Independent School District. And my dad was a teacher in the Edgewood Independent School District. And she went into the hospital on June 14th on his birthday. His 80th birthday was the last time that he saw her in person. And she was in the hospital for 3 weeks or so and, on a ventilator for 8 days. And after 8 days, her heart gave out, is what I understand. And so, my dad, we're concerned about my dad because he's still positive right now.
Right.
He took a test on Friday and it was still positive. But he's also been alone this whole time after his wife has passed away. So you can imagine, besides being concerned about his physical health, we're concerned about his emotional health as well.
Right. Secretary Castro, I actually learned that your dad was positive for the coronavirus when you were on television talking about the death of your stepmother, I think with Chris Hayes last week, right? So how old is your father, Secretary?
He's 80 years old. Yeah, he just turned 80 on June 14th, and that was also the day, as Joaquin mentioned, that Alice went into the hospital. But he's right there in that very vulnerable category, and he has the virus now. Fortunately, he's doing okay so far, and
he's not in the hospital, Secretary.
He's not. He hasn't gone into the hospital. He says he's feeling fine. I joke that this is because we have 5 half brothers and sisters. This is where having seven adult kids comes in handy because people are checking on him all the time. And I'm the one that lives closest to him, so I've taken him groceries a number of times now, and I know Joaquin calls him, and all of his kids do. But yeah, it drives home the point. And what I said in that interview the other day was, you got to take it seriously. You know, you got to take this virus seriously.
Well, if you look at the numbers, the number of people for whom this hits close to home, just statistically, right? We all know somebody, if you don't have somebody in your own family. So I know I don't need to tell you where we are with the virus in Texas. Yesterday, we had a record number of cases and hospitalizations, both well over 10,000. 87 reported deaths yesterday. More than 3,300 Texans have died from the virus in the last 4 months, and we've passed 275,000 confirmed cases. We've been reporting on hospitals running out of beds and drugs and ventilators and staffs, and now the morgues are full, so refrigerator trucks are having to pull in. Secretary, how did we get here? I mean, again, 4 months ago, none of this was the case. Life as we knew it was still basically life as we knew it. How did we get here?
Yeah, there was a slow response at the national level and at the state level. You know, we have a president who wanted to pretend like this really wasn't an issue, who said several times that it would go away, that we were going to go from 15 cases. Folks can remember when we only had 15 cases in this country to 0, is what he said shortly. Right. And you know, and also essentially this is a story about policymakers and the people that you put in office choosing ideology over public health and science. That happened at the federal level with Trump. And here, what happened was that same thing. I mean, and Joaquin has said this very well. You know, they want to take this see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil approach. And Abbott made 3 mistakes at least. I mean, he reopened too early. He didn't put enough testing or contact tracing in place. Around the time when we reopened in May, we were 48th per capita as a state in terms of testing. Right. And then on top of that, when county judges, whether it was Clay Jenkins in Dallas or mayors like Mayor Adler in Austin or Nuremberg here in San Antonio asked, hey, look, can we require masks? We need to be able to require masks and tailor other safety precautions for our particular circumstances. He said no. He said, my order supersedes you. And so those were 3 big mistakes. Now they're having to backtrack. And, you know, I want to commend y'all for the coverage that y'all have had. I think y'all have had the best coverage in terms of what's going on in different parts of the state, because, you know, people think of this as a big city issue, but your coverage and the writing of other folks has made clear. I mean, in Midland, Odessa, in the Rio Grande Valley, in other places, you know, they've run out of hospital beds, people having to wait for them. So this is affecting the entire state. It means that the governor should have handled this well from the very beginning with a statewide shutdown.
Yeah. Congressman, if I listen to your brother here talk about what happened at the federal level or did not, and what happened at the state level or did not, it sounds to me like this could have been avoided. Do you believe this could have been avoided? I mean, this virus is something. It's like nothing we've ever seen before. And, you know, the thought that somehow, if only we had done these things, none of the consequences that we've now come to accept would have been the case. It's kind of a big leap.
I guess, to be clear, I don't think that we're not saying that there would have been no consequences with a coronavirus going around the world. But I do think that the number of deaths, hospitalizations, and infections could have been significantly reduced. First, if the president had gotten his act together, and then second, if some of the governors had gotten their acts together, including Greg Abbott, including the governor in Florida, DeSantis, and in Arizona, for example, and other places as well. And yeah, I mean, let me give you one example, Evan, of what I think the president should have done early. I think, remember, there was this big fight over PPE and masks and the fact that there weren't enough and how were we going to distribute them and who was going to get them. And I think what the president should have done early is invoke the Defense Production Act. He should have gone to companies like 3M and Honeywell that make PPE and make masks and said, hey guys, I'm taking all of the stock of stuff that you have and I'm paying you a markup on your retail price. So you've now sold out and you're in a better position than you were yesterday. And I'm going to work with the National Guard and other private retailers that have national distribution networks, and we're going to get these things out across the country. That's what they did in other countries. That's partly what China did in its own country, is Basically taking these things and then distributing them, but also here in the United States, making sure those companies are whole and that they're getting paid for this stuff.
Well, many of you called for that, in fact, at the time. I remember hearing over and over, we need to invoke the Defense Production Act. Do you think it was ignorance on his part or on the part of his administration, or was there something else going on there? Did they not know, or did they have a reason that they didn't want to do it?
I mean, I think, Evan, it was part and parcel to Donald Trump's personality.
I guess that's the question I'm asking. Is it ignorance or malice? That's what I'm asking.
I mean, you ask a tough question. I mean, I think it's ignorance. I'm not going to go as far as to say that Donald Trump necessarily wants to see somebody die, but I do think that it's gross negligence and recklessness.
Right.
And ignorance.
Well, incompetence. It's incompetence.
Yeah, incompetence, all of it. Sure.
Yeah.
And I would say one other thing, Evan, about that. It's also that he's imprisoned by ideology. This idea that we're not going to tell a business, even in the middle of a pandemic,
right?
Even, with these unprecedented circumstances. Well, no, we're not going to go and tell a business, look, we need to take your stuff, and we're gonna, even if we're going to make you whole. Right. It's somebody that is a prisoner to that ideology too. Yeah. That it did not meet the moment of the emergency.
Hasn't that Secretary Castro also been the conundrum for Governor Abbott here? He's being attacked on his left and attacked on his right. He's being attacked on his left for not doing enough. But on his right, he's being attacked for doing too much. He's being attacked for shutting down businesses, for mandating the wearing of masks. And so he really has no, this is the conundrum for him, right? There's no way to avoid the political implications or consequences of these decisions, because whether to your left or to your right, you're being attacked all the time, as opposed to simply focusing on science or focusing on what's right for the public health.
I mean, exactly. That's why you have to go by the science, and that has to be your North Star. And instead, at different times, he's leaned a little more toward the science. At other times, he's leaned, and his fear of Dan Patrick primarying him or whatever it is, he's listened more to right-wing ideologues. But the long and short of it is that basically he's muddled the entire response because of it. And he basically did not have the fortitude to stand up in this emergency and say, we're going to go with the science. We're going to go with what's best for the public health.
Right. Congressman Castro, you used to be in the Texas legislature, as we said. Your former colleagues in the House and Senate, when they haven't been carping about the governor from one side or another, have mostly played no role in this. Do you think we need a special session to allow them to exert their influence? And what would that influence be over?
Oh, I absolutely think the governor should have called a special session. And I know there's concern about convening people physically, but Congress is going back to session with the option of remote voting, for example. So yeah, I think the governor should have called a special session. Let's start with the basics. The state has not committed, I won't say a single penny, but hardly any money at all on the coronavirus response. All of the money that has been used has been money that's come from the federal government, right? So my question is, why hasn't the governor taken the lead and used what he can of the rainy day fund, but also call the legislature into a special session to commit more of the rainy day fund to this problem? I mean, if this isn't a rainy day, then there is no such thing as a rainy day.
Yeah. Secretary Castro, you mentioned local elected officials. You mentioned your successor's successor as mayor, Mayor Nirenberg. I want you to put on your San Antonio hat again, because you used to be a local elected official yourself. How do you think the locals have done, by and large, through this? In the case of San Antonio, Ron Nirenberg and Bexar County Judge Wolf, or Congressman Castro's former colleagues in the House who are now running Houston and Dallas and El Paso. How have the local folks done in this?
They've done a lot better. They have hewed more to the scientists and the concern for public health. In the case of Bexar County here, with Judge Wolf and Mayor Nirenberg, I mean, they got out there pretty early in helping to shut things down and calling for people to wear masks. Wolf, jumped in front of the governor, I think very astutely, and forced his hand a few weeks ago to basically require that businesses require patrons to wear a mask when they go into a business if we were going to be opened up, which, again, I mean, taking the initiative in the interest of public health. They have been very transparent with the public. At one time, they were having kind of like Cuomo did in New York, right? press briefings every day. They went down to 2 days a week, and now they're at every day again because we're in this surge.
Cases have gone back up,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
I'd give them pretty high marks.
Yeah. Would you, I guess, I think you've kind of answered the question I was going to ask next, which is, would you have advised them to be more assertive or more defiant earlier on? And should they be more assertive in taking control of the situation or defying the governor now when they think he doesn't go far enough and saying, let's let the courts decide this, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to.
Yeah.
I believe that if it's in the interest of the public health and you see a state government that is not meeting its part of the bargain, then you have to be as assertive as you can. Obviously, look, when you're in that role as mayor or county judge, it's true. You're going to have to work with the governor, right? Yeah. And underlying politics is always the idea of consequences that could come, whether with regard to coronavirus or on other matters. And so it's a relationship that you got to cultivate there and keep. But this is an emergency like we've never seen before.
Yeah. On the other hand, if a salon owner can defy the governor, then a mayor or a county judge can defy the governor.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Congressman Castro, you know, I'm watching the last couple of days when local officials have openly questioned the guidance of the governor and Commissioner Morath on reopening the schools, for instance. That's been a form of defiance, right? And now they seem to have forced an official delay of a few weeks in the reopening of schools. So that kind of defiance can work in terms of producing results.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. When I see a 3-week delay like that or a few-week delay, I think they're trying to buy themselves time to make a more lasting decision about how to handle, especially the first semester of school. And I have a 4-year-old that's going to kindergarten. I have a 6-year-old that's going to be in first grade. So this is a decision for my wife and I about what we do with our kids, whether you think about sending them back or keep them at home and do distance learning. I think a lot of parents feel as though the distance learning hasn't been very effective. It's hard to do it effectively. But at the same time, there's a great concern about sending kids back into a physical environment where you just have so many people clustered, and it could lead to more infections.
Well, in fact, I'm going to ask you about that. I want to put you on the spot right now. I want to put you on the spot. You are a parent of school-age children. Secretary Castro, you are a parent of school-age children. Will you send your kids to school this fall? Are you each comfortable doing it as a parent?
I mean, if you asked me today, the answer would be no. Are things changing, perhaps, in the next few weeks? Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens in terms of the spread of the virus.
But if you had to decide today, Secretary Castro, you would not send your kids. Congressman, if you had to decide today, would you send your kids?
I wouldn't, and I don't think my wife would let me, even if I wanted to.
Right.
So I wouldn't, and I'm skeptical, Evan, that anybody's going to be able to send their kids back in mid-August or whenever the delay starts us off.
Right. On the subject, go ahead. I'm sorry, please, Secretary.
No. I was just going to say very quickly. I mean, this is a perfect example of if we'd had a better federal response and state response, perhaps we would have already been around the corner on this, and it would not have impacted the school year as much. Because who I'm thinking about, those teachers, right?
Right.
It's also about their health and
custodians, like your late stepmother. I mean, or cafeteria workers, like your late stepmother. Right. I mean, the fact is that there's staff in those schools. It's not just the kids; it's the grown-ups, right?
Yeah. Well, and that there's so many parents, though. We grew up for part of the time in a single-parent household where our mom was working. I mean, there are a lot of parents that right now are freaking out because I have to go to work. I can't just be here with my children for the whole duration of the day in and day out. I mean, I put out a tweet this morning saying that the grandparents are about to be called on like they never have before, essentially to serve as kind of parents or other relative, whether it's an aunt or uncle or other people. But that's where we're at. And that also damages our economy further. And so this whole idea that Abbott put out that, well, we're doing these things, reopening and so forth, because we wanted to save our economy, actually, you ended up hurting it more.
Yeah. I want to note before we go too much further, gentlemen, that communities of color in Texas and the biggest cities and elsewhere have been particularly slammed by the pandemic. We know this. It's been harder than it should be to get the data on it. In fact, the New York Times had to sue the CDC to get the data broken down by race. But Hispanic and Black Texans, like Hispanic and Black Americans, are contracting the virus and succumbing at a much higher rate. Secretary, what do we do about this? What do we think about this?
Yeah, I mean, that was a blockbuster analysis that the New York Times did. And what it shows is what we all know, right, when it comes to health, economic prospects, and just about every other quality of life aspect, that Black and brown communities are doing worse. It really drove home the point, though. So what do we do about that? That means that we have to have policies, make investments to have universal health care, to make sure that people have better economic opportunities, better benefits. And also, a lot of Black and brown workers are concentrated in these essential jobs, frontline jobs, whether farm workers, meat plant packing workers, grocery store workers, fast food workers. We need to address those industries and ensure that people can make a better livelihood and in a safer way than we have in the past, and do it not in a way that is quote unquote colorblind, but one that is astute and nuanced about the differences here.
Acknowledging of the reality. Congressman, Secretary Castro was talking earlier about the different parts of the state where the incidence of the coronavirus has been spiking, not just in the big cities. I'm thinking about the Panhandle and the meatpacking plants, where most of the workers in those plants are immigrant workers, right? They're Texans of color, or who are working in those plants. They can't afford not to go to work. They don't really have the option to say, I'm worried about the virus. And so unfortunately, we see in some of these communities as an economic necessity, the coronavirus spike. Congressman, that's a problem, is it not?
I would say we may have lost him here for a second.
Okay. Well, you and I can go back and forth if we need to while he dials back in. Secretary, let me ask you while the congressman comes back on. We seem to be on the verge of lockdowns in the big cities, if not in the state itself. We had Mayor Turner of Houston the other day say he really thought that we should have about a 2-week lockdown. There are rumors to the effect that there are other mayors considering that. There are rumors that the governor has so far denied that he's planning on locking down the state. Is there anything that we can or should do at this point to hold off a reclosing of the state? Or do you think that's what it will take now? Is that what you would be doing?
Yeah, well, I would have done that. And I said at the time that I thought that we should do that in the first place. I believe that we should do that now. And to me, if we look at the data from other countries around the world, whether you're talking about in Europe or especially in Asia, look, people have gone through what we would consider pretty severe lockdowns. But when they've come out on the other side of that, they've been able to manage this virus and to not see a huge spike again the way that we're seeing now. So the question is, are you going to manage this with a pretty severe lockdown, but one that will help get you around the corner? Or are we going to do what we've been doing, which is basically taking half measures and doing it in a piecemeal kind of way, different dates, different parts of the state with different ordinances? Or are you going to do it the right way? And I think that we finally need to do it the right way. I wouldn't be surprised at all if Governor Abbott actually orders a shutdown at some point in the next few days.
You know what the pushback is, though, Secretary Castro, that there are consequences to an economic shutdown of the state. You don't have to go all the way into Dan Patrick territory to acknowledge that the closing down of the state, even for public health reasons, comes at a cost. We've already had 2.8 million Texans file for unemployment in the last 4 months. I mean, it's often posed as an either or. Right, but it's more complicated than that.
I see these two things as tied together. Look, we're seeing the economic consequences right now of the fact that we're still dealing with this. Where if we had done this correctly in the beginning, we might have turned the corner already. Yeah. So, it's are you prolonging the economic pain and making it greater, or are you cordoning that off to a specific time frame that is shorter? And then you're able to fully recover, I think, more quickly. So, I take the economic argument. It's a valid argument. Of course, we got to be concerned about people's livelihoods. The other thing I'll say, Evan, is this is an example where we need robust government. Yeah. We need the government to step in and provide resources for people to be able to get by, provide eviction moratoriums so that people are not put out on the street. Obviously invest in a vaccine and get that quickly. This is a time that requires robust government, and we should not be afraid to say that and to act in that way.
Right. It's interesting to me that this is the moment when our longstanding preaching that government should not be trusted or that government is bad, those chickens kind of come home to roost in a moment like this, don't they? You know, we mandate that people wear masks, and people say we're not going to wear masks because we don't trust the people telling us to wear masks. To, you know, it's going to be this, and then it's going to be 15 other things. Or we don't like government involved, but then we're all basically left to our own devices on something like this, right? That's the big challenge.
We're seeing housing, my neck of the woods of housing is a good example of that. We're seeing the consequences of underinvesting in housing for the last 40 years. And the fact that you're facing an evictions crisis over the next 8 weeks, where by one estimate, up to 20 million people could face eviction. We had an affordability crisis before we came into this pandemic. This has made it worse, and we should learn a lesson from that going forward.
Yeah. Do you think we're being told the whole story, Secretary Castro, that we have all the data and that the administration is being transparent about the magnitude of this? I saw today that the White House is now asking hospitals to bypass the CDC and report coronavirus data to the Department of Health and Human Services directly. The implication is that politics may determine what we learn and don't learn. Do we have all the data that we need?
No, I don't believe so. It's hard to, I want to trust, the folks in the administration, because I served in an administration, and I know that, look, those agencies are not just made up of political appointees. The vast majority of people that work in them are actually non-political appointees who have a fidelity to the mission of the organization. But then you see something like this, where they're trying to hopscotch, just jump over the CDC and Vice President Pence's comments that basically say, oh, I hope you went determine what we do with students based on the warnings of the CDC. Well, that's what the whole CDC is for, so it makes it very difficult. And fundamentally, I'm skeptical of data that comes out of this administration or that we never hear about.
Is this fixable at this point, or has too much time passed? 4 months of this? I mean, I'm looking for a ray of hope here, Secretary Castro.
No, of course it's fixable. I think it's fixable. I think that at every level there needs to be a more assertive push. And also, and this is, I think, where people can find some common ground. Look, I also acknowledge that each and every one of us, that we have some responsibility to shoulder, to go wear your mask, to social distance, to wash your hands, to be mindful, especially when you're around people who are in a vulnerable population, like senior citizens or people with compromised immune systems. All of us can play a role. And that's one of the reasons I'm more hopeful, is because I know it's about the government, but it's not only about the government. It's also about each and every one of us as the American people to play our part.
So while your brother has ditched us and escaped, I'm going to then turn my attention to Vice President Biden and to the presidential race in Texas. I'm just going to laser focus on you, and I'm going to ask you the questions that I was going to ask the both of you. Has he come back?
I got disconnected.
Did you get a better offer? What happened? I mean, I feel.
The Wi-Fi just went out.
Should I take this personally? All right, we're about to talk about the presidential race, Congressman, and so I'm going to hit you with this first. We've had 4 polls in the last 2 weeks of the presidential race in this state. They range from Trump +4 to Biden +5. Even if you take the under here from your side and you believe that Trump +4 is where we are, the president won Texas by 9 points last time, and that was the closest presidential race in 20 years. You really think that this is a winnable race for the Democrat in this case?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think a few things. Donald Trump's persona and his messaging and his approach to politics has always been very divisive and out of step with what is a very diverse electorate in Texas. But now you layer that on top of the fact that he's had 3.5 horrendous years of a presidency. And then obviously his mismanagement of the coronavirus, which has literally cost Americans and Texans their lives. I think that that Joe Biden has a good chance of winning Texas. And even if he doesn't win, coming very close, within 2 or 3 points.
Secretary Castro, I keep wondering whether this race is Trump versus Biden or Trump versus Trump.
Yeah.
I mean, is this a referendum on the president more than a choice, provided Vice President Biden doesn't do something to disqualify himself, is this not just a referendum?
Well,
right?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, it is a referendum on Trump. And I think that Biden wins either way, whether it's a choice election, as they say, between Trump and Biden, or whether it's mostly a referendum on Trump. He has failed. His failure has been spectacular, and it's costing thousands of lives now. And during this time period, what do people want? Do they want somebody with that track record, or do they want somebody with the vice president's track record of success, of experience, of a steady hand, and somebody that can try and bring the country together? So I think, as the Trump campaign tries to get out of this bind, whether it goes negative or it goes positive, so to speak, I don't think he's going to be able to spin out of a loss.
Yeah. Secretary Castro, how enthusiastic are you about the vice president's campaign? I mean, you ran against him. Obviously, you thought you'd do a better job. And then when you dropped out, you endorsed somebody else. And the conventional wisdom is that you were a late and perhaps grudging endorser of Vice President Biden. You seem to be on board now. Is that the wrong perception?
Not at all. I'm enthusiastically supporting him. We just did a Texas event that he was part of, fundraiser for the campaign that Willie Nelson was part of, and Beto and others. Did an Arizona event. I'm going to continue to campaign and do anything that I can to help him get elected. I believe that he won the nomination because he's the candidate that meets this moment. People were looking for his experience, his steady hand, his vision for the future. And he is the person that we're going to make sure wins in November.
Congressman, same thing. You're enthusiastic and you'll support him in any way you can.
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, this weekend I just did a New Mexico event, virtually, obviously, for President Biden. We just met with the Texas delegation, met with his campaign team.
Right.
He's visiting with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus tomorrow on Zoom or virtually. So, yeah, we're doing everything that we can to help him win.
Congressman, there's been polling that has suggested that the vice president is doing worse with Hispanic voters than Hillary Clinton did 4 years ago. How does he solve that problem?
I think just a lot of outreach. And I've seen now the campaign's plan for Spanish language media, for media in Latino markets, Hispanic markets. It'll be very important. And I think it's just a matter of some outreach. And that's what they're going to do. And so I think you'll see those numbers come back exactly where he needs them to be in order to win in November.
If he wins, would either of you entertain going into his administration? I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. Secretary Castro, for you, that would be kind of a been there, done that moment, right? To go back in a cabinet capacity. Maybe you're waiting to run. Maybe you're waiting to run for governor in 2022. You want to announce that now?
Yeah, right now, for the first time in a long time, I'm not aiming for anything. Right now, in my mind, there's a longer runway in the private sector. Obviously, I'm going to continue to use my voice as I am with People First Future to support great candidates and weigh in on policy.
But you're not thinking about elective office right now?
I'm not. Yeah.
So are you taking yourself out of the running to run for governor in 2022?
No. I guess the best way to describe it is, I'm not aiming for anything right now, but I'll see what happens in terms of whether I feel like, I could add something and I want to run for an office in the future. I might, but right now I'm not. You could, when I got out of the Obama administration, I pretty much knew that I wanted to run for president, and very early on in 2017, began the process of that. These are huge races that you usually don't just jump into unless you're a billionaire and you can do it on a fly. Right now, I'm not aiming for anything.
Okay. Congressman, if I read the newspaper correctly, you're focused on getting into a cage match with more senior colleagues in the House to be chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee. Is that right?
I'm looking at it, yeah. All of us, nobody has made a declaration. We're still being respectful of the fact that Elliot Engel, who's the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, his race has not officially been called. So I won't have any kind of announcement until after that's done.
But if Engel lost, do you plan to get into the battle for the chairmanship?
I promise when that time comes, I will reach out to you directly, Evan.
And then the minute you're about to tell me, your internet will cut out, and that'll be the end of it. Right? I won't actually be able to see.
I can't promise that it won't.
My memory, Congressman, is that you actually had designs on possibly going into a presidential administration yourself, maybe as Secretary of State, maybe as UN ambassador, maybe some job that would draw on your experience in the House. would you entertain a job in the Biden administration if they came looking?
I mean, look, ultimately, when you get a president that comes in there, the president, in this case, Joe Biden, picks his team of people. So that's up to the president. That said, there are a few things that I would love to be able to do in an administration, if not in the next few years, someday. But I'm also not, absolutely compelled to say, man, I got to go do this one thing in a presidential administration. I'm very proud to represent the people of San Antonio, the people of my hometown. And I'm also working on foreign affairs issues and other issues a great deal.
So let me end us today with a couple of questions that we got from our audience members in advance, if you don't mind. Secretary Castro, I'm going to ask you one first. This is from Bobby. What financial priorities should we shift away from so we can invest in financial safety nets for the people who've been left unemployed in the middle of this pandemic?
It's a great question. I think that if you're talking about the federal level, the United States spends right now, I believe, more on military defense than the next 7 or 8 countries combined.
Yep.
And I've always believed that we need to scrutinize the budgets of every single department in our federal government. And I believe you can achieve savings there. I also believe that this is a time when we need to make investment. And so during the campaign, we put out a whole plan on how we would raise revenue. Different types of ways to raise revenue so that we could fund healthcare and housing and better economic opportunity.
So it's not just addition by subtraction. It may also be addition by addition. We just may simply need to spend more money, not redirect money. Yeah.
In some cases, sure, yeah.
Yeah. Congressman, Veronica asks if anybody in the sort of high ranks of office or power is visiting state prisons. Are there sufficient means to protect them and the people working there from this virus? We have been reporting at the Tribune, Jolie McCullough, my colleague, on the incidence of the coronavirus. Carrie Blakinger at the Marshall Project has been reporting on this. The prisons are a serious hotspot, maybe the most serious hotspot right now, aren't they?
No, that's absolutely right. And that's a very important question because we've seen the coronavirus spread in confined spaces like that. The naval ships, the cruise ships, nursing homes, detention centers. Myself, Sylvia Garcia, and Henry Cuellar went to 2 detention centers for the very reason of oversight and to see what was going on there. And when we were there, we were actually exposed to an employee who was positive. And so that's why I had to go get 2 tests myself that came back negative. But I want to say yes, that there are groups of people that have visited in the Congress, that have visited the prisons. And that's something that I've discussed with my staff even doing. But we hit the detention centers first.
You believe that the inmates in Texas prisons deserve to be treated any differently than the rest of us out here walking around in the world? I mean, they're still Americans, Texans, right? But we seem to just sort of say, well, that's just the prison. So don't worry about that, right? Yeah.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, I think the problem, Evan, is that for a long time among Texas leaders, that was the mentality: is that if you're in prison, you basically you deserve what you get, right? I mean. But look, sending somebody to prison for 3 years or 5 years is not supposed to be a death sentence for them.
Right.
They're supposed to be able to do their time, of course, but it shouldn't be a death sentence for them. And in some of these prisons, the coronavirus has run rampant. So yeah, it's a very serious issue.
Right. Secretary Castro, Marissa asks, what are the next steps in the fight for justice for Vanessa Guillen? I know that you're both very much focused on the tragic circumstances in Killeen.
Yeah, my hope is, and Joaquin can address this as well, but strong congressional oversight on the Army, including base leadership, strong Inspector General oversight, changes perhaps to personnel if that's warranted. I think what galled a lot of people is that there seemed to be insufficient lack of concern for her life.
Yeah.
Because of who she was. And the idea that she, may have faced, or she said to her family that she faced sexual harassment and that may not have been taken seriously. We know that it wasn't taken seriously in other instances that are well documented within the military and that it has been rampant.
Yeah.
You need a shock to the system, something that is going to change that culture and get people to take it seriously. And that has not happened yet. So I believe the next frontier is doing what it takes to make that happen.
Yeah. Forgive me, Congressman Castro, but strong congressional oversight is sometimes an oxymoron, like jumbo shrimp. Why should we have any confidence that your oversight on this is going to be any more effective than the oversight you've demonstrated in other areas?
Well, let me tell you a quick story. I was elected in 2012.
Yeah.
My very first congressional hearing, I was assigned to the Armed Services Committee at the time and the Foreign Affairs Committee. My very first congressional hearing was on military sexual trauma and the scandal at Lackland Air Force Base in my district. And at the time, the Air Force, but I'll say the military generally, said, we know we have a problem with sexual assault, sexual harassment, so forth. We know that things are messed up. Give us a chance to fix it.
Yeah.
And then we come, I'm not on the Armed Services Committee, but we made changes back then, and the military made changes. We come 7 years down the road, and you have a situation like Vanessa Guillen. And then after that, about 1,000 women, as far as I can tell, service members, who've come forward with their own stories of military sexual trauma. So my point is that obviously the changes that were made, I think were made in earnest, both by the Congress and the military, but they haven't been enough, and they haven't changed enough. And the military is failing its female service members, and the government has failed. Well, obviously Vanessa Guillen, but also our female service members. And it may be time, for example, that we take the prosecution of these cases out of the military justice system and move it into the civilian justice system so that there's more independence, and we can make sure that prosecutions are had.
Okay. Thank you, Congressman. Last question, and here I'm hoping I've worn you both down so that you lower your guard and you answer. This is from Peter. Who will be Joe Biden's choice for vice president? On the spot, Congressman. Who's it going to be?
I think it's either Kamala Harris or Elizabeth Warren.
One or the other.
That's my best read.
Yeah. Are you pulling for Elizabeth Warren, whom you endorsed after your brother got out of the race for president?
Yeah, listen, we're close to both Kamala and Elizabeth Warren, but yeah, Elizabeth Warren has been wonderful. We were both proud to support her after Julián got out of the race.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's Joe Biden's choice.
But you think it's one or the other?
I would say those to me seem like the top two contenders.
Yeah.
There are a lot of great people on that list of folks, right? But I'm just talking, if you ask me strategically, where do I think that it comes down?
It's those two.
That's probably where it is.
Yeah. Secretary Castro, what do you say? Agree?
Well, I think the great news is that he has a wealth of very talented options there of people. But yeah, I guess I'd say I don't have any more insight than anybody else right now, except to say that, those are the two names that I hear the most, and both of them are super talented. I saw both of them, up close on the campaign trail. Both would offer a great partnership to Joe Biden if they were vice president, and both of them can do the job.
Yeah. Be interesting to see either one of those two in the debate with Mike Pence, wouldn't it?
That'd be great.
Yeah. He wouldn't last 2 rounds. He wouldn't last
2 rounds. All right, good. Well, that's our time. Thanks to everybody for tuning in. Secretary Castro, thank you. Congressman Castro,
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us. I want to thank the sponsors for supporting today's event. If you'd like to support events like this one in the future, please become a Texas Tribune member and make our public service journalism possible. Go to texastribune.org/join. Stay safe and healthy, gentlemen, and everybody out in the audience watching. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you again. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye.